Hello my friends, I'm Lucas and you are watching coldemonspl. Hope you are in a good mood, at least I am, but if not, just prepare a drink just like me and let's start today's episode. Today we are going to begin making additions to add the human factor to the model. There will be elements from plastic and resin sets available on the market, as well as some scratch built elements. But before all this will be started, subscribe to the channel, it will definitely help me in its development. Your support is very important and motivating for me, so hit that subscribe button now. Thank you very much. Okay, the first surface I painted was of course the bottom of the hull, and this is AK Interactive red primer, and then the simmered section which I covered with the base color, which was Tamiya XF88. All this to prepare a color base for the application of dirty dust weathering paint, which has the perfect color for use on vehicles riding in summer dusty and low mud terrain. This paint is a diluted pigment that we can easily apply with an airbrush, and it's best to do it with it because we won't achieve such results with a brush due to the specificity of the paint. I focused mainly on the places that will be covered in a moment by wheels and tracks and less on the bottom of the hull. By mixing both products I prepared the appropriate color of the mud and put it on the sides of the fuselage and in a small amount on the bottom. I did it more for a peace of mind because nothing will be visible in a moment. You can watch the entire process of preparing the wheels and tracks in two movies, the links of which are above right now. Now we will prepare the tarpaulins. What is needed for this? A regular 2-layer paper tissue will be perfect. We cut off all embossed patterns so that they don't accidentally show up after painting. And we try on the model. It all depends on what we need to get. I need a large tarpaulin to be squeezed between the supper's bridge and hull. A stand I used all the time works very well for painting like this one, as you can see where the uneven surface don't stick to the material or the material don't stick to the pad. We mix exactly the color we need with PVA glue, adding a tap water, and we should get the consistency of milk just like for an airbrush. I decided that a slightly darker color would be better, so I added 7 drops of a darker shade. Of course this amount depends on our needs, so don't think that 7 is so important. And now we put paint on the paper. Note how quickly the paint spreads on the paper, its thickness means that the other side is colored at the same time. Now we gently turn the whole piece to check if the color covers all surface. Next we let it dry or use accelerator to shorten the waiting time. We use hot air until it's dry enough that our fingers aren't dirty with paint, but at the same time it is still flexible and easy to arrange. Damn it! Stupid paper. Oh, come on! And we start the fun with arranging. If a given fragment turns out to be too large, you can easily trim it with sharp scissors. As you can see, the material is quite durable and it isn't damaged by working with sharp tools. All this is due to the mixture of glue and paint that penetrated the structure and strengthened it. With the rest you will see in another example in a moment. What the tarpaulin will look like depends only on your imagination. You can add additional patches, stripes, lines of connecting individual fragments, windows, buttons, strings, hooks and whatever else you need. Of course it's better to think about what you want to add because some of these elements are better prepared before forming and others after placing them on the model. In order for the folds to be easy to arrange, it's worth having some water on hand which you can spread the paper over. Even the small quantities of it may work wonders. I also use the paint which I painted the tarpaulin because thanks to it I am able to model individual places even more effectively. Let's make a break for a moment. I found such a set in my collection. And of course I decided to use a work bike as an accessory for my Panther because once I saw an archival film where the Germans have some fun with this kind of motorbike? So the idea seems pretty good to me. It fit perfectly and it looked natural as it lays in the space between the bridge and the fuselage with the only real wheel sticking out. I'm sure it's the best place for it and it wouldn't have slipped to the ground. A few extra moments to form the entire tarpaulin material to the end and we can take care of the next elements. On the left side, small pieces of tarps did the job and they were perfect to be used as a pads for a jerry can and a suitcase. A bit larger piece landed on the engine plate because I wanted to put a few other elements on it, including one especially important for the crew and delicate at the same time. And the first element is a sack with something. We can only guess what is there. But it doesn't matter. The second element is a bottle crate. Of course they will be there later and they will be full, so the crew has a reserve for the evening after the fight, unless they break from debris on other flying objects, of course. More blankets were tucked in here and there, they are also paper made. I think I don't need to explain why, but when arranging a stowage it's worth checking if the turret rotates freely. This frame from propaganda movie is very inspiring and has everything that is typical for the period, region and conditions of the fight I want to show in my project. The camouflage prepared of the Zeltbahns and foliage is exactly what I want to make on my model. So now we turn to the biggest challenge of this episode. How to make a zeltbahn and arrange it in a realistic way to achieve an effect close to what we can see in the photo. We take the tissue again and draw the shape and size of the zeltbahn on them. I did it right away without keeping the accurate dimensions. Why? After placing it on the model it won't be completely visible whether we have an excess or a lack of a millimeter or two. I'm lazy and I didn't want to look for real dimensions. Oh my god! And what now? Completely nothing. Relax. We cut out, remembering that it can be corrected after painting the first layer when the material is relatively dry. We paint with desired color and dry the tarps exactly as before. When the paint doesn't stain the fingers and the whole thing is flexible enough, we can start arranging the pieces on the model. Before that you need to plan how and where they will be located, so as not to waste the time unnecessarily. It's worth remembering that the material from which these ponchos were made wasn't as soft as cotton, so the arrangement with straight folds shouldn't be surprising. As you can see, it goes quite smoothly even though the movie is accelerated. I don't want you to fall asleep. As I said before, the material can be easily cut to the desired shape when it dries. The effect is much better than before painting. If a given part becomes too dry, which will almost certainly happen if we arrange more than one tarp, we can easily soak it with a small amount of water. In this way we restore its flexibility as at the beginning of the entire process. The most important thing is to remember to form the entire tarpaulin in a realistic way. I always try to imagine how a crew member would arrange it or how it might look like while driving, when it comes loose or slips off, whether it's torn by bushes or debris in the battle. So in general the entire procedure is the same as before. Having a moment and taking advantage of you still here, I remind you to subscribe to the channel, click the like and leave a comment after you finish watching. You probably know that after the positive feedback you leave, the channel will perform better in the statistics, so don't wait with it. Okay, let's break away from Zeltbahns for a moment and come back to the smaller elements that are also important for the final effect. As an imitation of a string, I use a flexible modeling treat. I put the longer piece in the rear part, arranging it as if it was falling off the vehicle while riding. Here and there I glued it to the surface of the model. The tarpaulins are completely dry and hard, so it's time to start painting. Of course, the acrylic paints are the best for this job. As the best reference, I use Calvin Tan's book about making waffen SS figures, where it's perfectly shown what colors and methods we can use to paint particular camouflages which were in service during the war. Exactly these methods I have applied here. Of course, this is not a super perfect painting made by the masters of this subject, but for the needs of my model and taking into account that they will be very dirty soon, it's sufficient. Let the painting go on and I explain the topic of choosing the method of making a zeltbahn. Basically, we have three options. The first is to use the zeltbahn printed on paper and place it on the model. I'm not sure how a print would handle bending and forming. It seems to me that this isn't an ideal solution to the goal we want to achieve. The second option is to prepare a zeltbahn from milliput green stuff or something like this. This already seems better to me, but still has too many disadvantages. The limited ability to correct the alignment is the biggest drawback. The advantage is that after drying we can remove such an element and paint it separately. The third option is what I am showing here, and to make it even better, in a moment you will find out that we have version A and version B. What I have been doing so far is the A version. As you can see, the effect is pretty cool, huh? I've done a lot of talking over last minutes, so need to rest for a couple seconds. Cheers! Note how the tarp hangs on the right side of the vehicle. Thanks to this arrangement I added a bit of realism that I talked about earlier and at the same time covered the manufacturer's error in setting up the side shields. It's time to paint all the elements I have chosen for the model. As in some places they stuck together to the tarps because, as you probably remember, they were also soaked with PVA glue, you have to be careful when removing them. It's better to lever than tear off. I prepared all the elements for painting by drilling holes in them and fixing on the sticks. In the case of Welk bike I didn't want to risk drilling, so I stuck the stick on the bottom because it won't be fully visible anyway. And I start painting. First a grey Tamiya acrylic paint as a foundation. I covered all the elements that I had prepared with it. Immediately after drying I started applying basic colors to the individual parts. Welk bike got the base color from olive drab, which I then brightened up with a bit of the XF71 cockpit green. Later I painted the blankets, prepared vodka bottles for the crate and put echelon decals on the fire extinguisher. As you remember, this is an element from T-Rex in a version removed from the handle with folded handles. Stickers clearly enrich its appearance. I highly recommended them. We go back to the zeltbahn again. Looking at the archival photo and comparing to it the effect that I have obtained on my miniature, I found that I was still missing something on my model. And I decided to make an additional 2 tarps. To make some more mess and using the original picture shown before, I wanted to add a resin grenade box, which was supposed to lie on the turret. Of course I wanted it to be seen, but you will see what came out of it after all. I used next colors for painting because the camo pattern will be different. Obviously they were taken from the book I showed earlier. As you can see, it was a bit of fun trying to repeat the pattern, but while painting it I found it pointless because it won't be visible anyway. My point here is that these two Zeltbahns should be different from the ones adding before. But wait a minute, after all painting I have ponchos outside the model. Exactly, this is the version B I was talking about earlier. Painting first, then laying on the model. And the final effect. It turned out pretty cool, and the answer how to arrange them now when they are already painted is very simple. We put a few drops of water to make the material soft. We spread it with a brush and after a while we can get to work. See how easy it is to model paper soaked with paint and glue. It's almost perfect. During the laying on the Zeltbahn I didn't damage it even once. Also the painted camo wasn't damaged anywhere even though the paper was wet all the time. Here you can see one of the trials. Note how much the paper is treated and nothing bad has happened with it. Unfortunately my plan to lay a tarp on the grenade box failed. I wasn't able to do it. I tried various options for arranging the poncho and finally covered it completely, making only outline of its shape. And now you can see the final version of the Zeltbahn arrangement. You have to carefully inspect all the tarps and check if their folds look good enough. To keep them in correct shape we can finally use the PVA glue here and there. Of course I'm talking only about individual cases where our intervention is necessary. I assume that the entire element is almost 100% correctly positioned. The old modeling sentence says, "Everything needs to be painted." A long time ago I was a bit surprised, but I tested it on my own models and now I know that it's completely true. Everything needs to be painted. Even the same color, and even if the element is small or thin like this string, it perfectly reflects the meaning of this principle. I added some dust on the whelk bike, symbolical because I will weathering the whole thing later anyway, so it will be treated accordingly. Of course I had previously applied decals with numbers and now I could easily stick it to Panther. I did a similar thing with the rest of the elements that were already painted and waiting for their turn. From Plus model set I pulled out this oil can. It was held in place with super glue. This milk can is from Mini Art set and it's a nice addition. Anyway, I found a photo where an identical one is standing on a Panther's armor. The bucket is so popular on the German Panzers that it couldn't be missing on my model as well. It also comes from Mini Art. Of course, at least one jerry can couldn't be missing. This one is a resin product from Eureka XXL. I like this suitcase a lot. Stickers from traveling around the world add an interesting color accent. Obviously, such available cargo needs to be tied. Again, the flexible treat was used. I tied the jerry can and the suitcase together and a bit of super glue was very helpful to keep the line in place. I always try to tie a string as if it were for real. Of course this is only an imitation, so sometimes you have to work a bit more to keep everything going as it should. The crate of vodka and sack were put on the engine plate. Of course I also glued on a fire extinguisher and extra blankets. The photo I found on the internet confirms that the fire extinguishers were transported just like on my model. Please don't ask me why I use PVA glue here. It was next to me, so I grabbed it and that's all. I placed the last Zeltbahn on the back and attached the antenna rod. The last elements I wanted to add were some additional parts for machine gun, an ammo belt and empty shells. The ammunition belt is a photo etch from the Aber set. The size fits perfectly and it's easy to bend. Even though it's flat, it's much better than any resin or plastic kits. I painted it with acrylics, but before I applied a metal primer. Then I glued it to the weapon and formed it properly. If you would like to know, I didn't use a special ammo bag because I've just lost it somewhere and I had one only. You know, I'm lazy, so I didn't want to make it from scratch. And the great gem at the end. 50 empty Browning shells from master model. The Browning? Who cares? No one will notice the difference. And the effect is great. Check it out, how cool they look. If anyone wonders how to stick them, the answer is very simple. The pigment cement will do the job, but first you need to put them on the model. Of course, let's turn on the imagination. A wise arrangement of the shells doesn't mean to throw them onto the model, because such actions usually end up with the loss of the parts. It's better to do it carefully, one by one. When they are all in the correct places, for example in recesses or in corners, we can start sticking them. I use the brush to apply glue to the right places. The excess can be easily drained with a paper tissue. After drying there are no stains and the shells stick well. And of course you have to paint them. In the case of these little ones, it's easier to do it when they are already glued. As you can see, the pigment cement did its job perfectly. And ready. The stage that I usually do at the end has now been done in the middle of the whole process. You know how it is. I didn't plan it, but never mind. It's a job that needs to be done anyway, so no problem. In the next episode I will deal with weathering because it's time to do it. For now, thank you for watching this movie. I hope that doing stowage will be much easier for those who have avoided this topic so far. I am very pleased with the effect I have achieved, especially with the Zeltbahns, which do the job as expected. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, click the thumb up, share my video and write a comment. It's not much, but it definitely helped me. Don't be an ass and click subscribe button. Thank you very much. Many thanks to my patrons who supported me. If you want to join the coldemonspl team, check out the Patreon site and choose your level of support. You will be surely satisfied. That's all for today, see ya next time, cheers!